Wow, that was scary. And let us see if you can spot all of the clues that we missed or maybe didn't pay enough attention to in our summary. She was barefoot. We didn't actually pay attention to the fact that she was barefoot, which could suggest a few things. 1. She could be coming from the same house that Sarah is living in, because why would she need shoes if she lives close enough to walk to someone else's house? 2. It could mean that she doesn't have shoes and is homeless and looking for shelter, although that might not make sense given the way that she was standing perfectly still and glowing in the darkness like she wasn't even there. Or 3. She may not have been human. In horror stories, supernatural beings are often shown as being barefoot because they do and need shoes, or their feet might actually be hooves or claws. We can also point out that Sarah says that the woman had been there the night before, so it wasn't the first time that this woman had visited her in her yard. So why did Sarah only notice her when the dog was making noise? Why didn't she pay attention to the dog the first 2 nights? If she'd listened to him and gone out to see what he was barking at, maybe she would have seen the woman earlier, stopped her somehow, or avoided her altogether. Instead, the woman had to come inside her house and kill her dog before Sarah finally paid attention to her. And speaking of the dog, why did the woman come back after killing him? Killing Max must have taken some energy and effort, but the story says that she came back that night to stand in the yard. Why? Was she taunting Sarah? Did she expect Sarah to come out and try to fight her? Maybe she thought that Sarah would come out and chase her into the woods. We don't know. It might have been the footprints in the grass the night after the woman had stood in the yard that suggested to Sarah that she should call the sheriff. Had she not seen these prints, she might have assumed that the woman had vanished into thin air after walking through her yard. They could have easily used this detail to fool us into thinking that the woman really did go away, that she was a real person who was somehow stalking Sarah, but the footprints showed that she wasn't going very far. And since Sarah noticed them right below her window, that suggests that the woman was watching her while she was sleeping. Another thing that Sarah could have done differently, and this would have been a big mistake, was to drive into town to ask people about the woman. By doing this, she was leaving her home completely unguarded and alone during the day. This was a terrible idea considering that the woman had killed her dog, was presumably strong enough to break into her house, and was likely dangerous. She should have locked up, called the sheriff, and stayed on the phone with him until he arrived rather than wandering around the town and giving this woman plenty of time to slip back into her house unseen. Something that we didn't mention yet is that Sarah could have run away. She could have locked herself in the bedroom, called the police, waited for them to arrive, and explained everything to them. But instead, she chose to confront the woman. We don't know exactly what she planned to do. Maybe she wanted to ask her more questions or try to stop her from entering her home. But either way, it didn't work, and running away would have been a much better option for her. But let's say that she couldn't remember that the day before. Maybe she'd blocked it out or gotten drunk and just had a false memory. Well, when the woman knocked on the door, she should have opened it with a weapon in her hands. She had a gun, so why didn't she grab it and blast the woman? Well, she may have been hoping that the woman wouldn't enter her home. She may have hoped that she'd just stop knocking after a while and go away. She may have thought that she would leave once the sun came up, or that she'd somehow vanish again, like she did the night before. Whatever her reasoning, it didn't work, and the best chance that she had to defend herself was right here. But she hesitated. She chose to keep her door closed and to stay behind the security of her door instead of facing whatever was on the other side. And while all of this was going on, she had a shotgun leaning against her bed. Now, we understand that she was afraid, but if she truly feared for her life, she should have used the weapon that she had. She might have been able to scare the woman away, especially since it's clear that the woman was somewhat afraid of the dog. If she had shot the woman, she could have seriously injured or killed her, giving her time to escape, call the police, or lock herself in a safe place. Instead, she just sat there and hoped that the knocking would stop. When it comes to paranormal tales like this, we recommend always bringing a weapon to bed with you. If you feel threatened, you might not have time to find a weapon in the middle of the night. But if you already have it beside you, you'll have a better chance of defending yourself, especially against an intruder that sneaks in while you're asleep. The story tells us that the woman's mouth moved as if she were trying to speak, but no sound came out. This is a pretty common trick that ghosts use in order to try to get someone's attention. They want to talk to the living and warn them about something or tell them something important, but they cannot actually produce a sound. Instead, they try to silently mouth the words that they want to say. Sometimes they'll write messages or try to communicate by moving objects around. But most of the time, if they try to talk to you, it means that they want to warn you about something. In this case, she could have told Sarah to run away, to protect herself, to call the police, or anything along those lines. But the woman simply stood there and watched Sarah, and since Sarah didn't pay attention to her, the woman decided to take matters into her own hands, and she killed the dog. We also think that Sarah should have immediately called the police after seeing the woman in her yard the first time. Even if the woman had vanished and left no trace of her presence, she should have reported it. Otherwise, how would the police ever know that something was wrong? It's clear that the woman meant her harm because she entered her yard and refused to leave. Had Sarah called the police the first time she saw her, they could have set up a perimeter around the house to catch the woman if she tried to leave. Or, if they'd known that she was potentially dangerous, they could have armed Sarah with a weapon and helped her defend herself against the woman. Instead, Sarah let her wander freely around her property, allowing her to sneak into her house unnoticed and kill her pet. Now, another thing that we didn't mention yet is that Sarah should have locked her doors. She could have easily locked her windows and doors and stayed on the phone with the sheriff until he arrived. She could have barricaded herself in a room and waited for the police. That would have been a much better option for her than sitting out on her porch with a gun in her lap and a shotgun propped against her leg. If she'd been hiding in a room, the woman wouldn't have been able to surprise her. And finally, we want to point out that this whole story could have been avoided if Sarah had listened to the locals. When she first arrived at the house, she should have asked around and learned about the legend of the woman who haunts the property. Then, when she saw the woman in her yard, she would have known who she was dealing with. Of course, knowing that this is a haunted house, she probably would have moved somewhere else. And if she had done that, she would have never had to worry about the woman or her dog.